This video goes out to all of my game development friends. So this is to help you get better sound and music in your game. If this is your first game and you have no idea how to work with audio people, this is for you. And if this is your 12th game and you're still a little confused about how to work with audio people, this is still for you because that's frankly most people. So I want to give you a few reasons on why you should consider audio early on in your game design process, early on in your development process, as early as programming and art and any other discipline. Honestly, audio is often left to the very end of game development, leaving people like us to kind of scramble and work out something decent so that the game can ship on time. My record is doing 5 games, sound and music, top to bottom, in 48 hours. So don't do that with your composers and sound designers because you won't get a great game in the end. Because when you have great audio and you have great art and you have great systems and design, then the game will end up being very, very good. But if you take one of those elements out, most often it's audio, then that will degrade from the overall quality of the game and get rid of a lot of polish. And that's the first reason you want to consider audio very, very early, even when the game is just a bunch of gray cubes and blocked out rooms. Because when you're showing off your game to other people, whether it be at conferences or to development friends or friends and family, whoever it may be, having polish will mean that it has a better big impact. It has the capability of creating a better first impression. And if you plan on selling your game, that's really, really important. If you show off your game at things like PAX or GDC or any other of the millions of video game conferences out there, you want to make sure you have as much impact as humanly possible. And ignoring audio, which is frankly what most of those games do, will make sure that you don't have as much impact. So if you consider it early, you have someone working with you very early on, you'll have more polish, you can come across as a better game even in the early stages at things like conferences, development meetups, or just showing it off to friends and family. The second reason for wanting to consider audio very early on in the process is very simple. I always like to say that game development is nothing more than a whole bunch of people just kind of failing until something comes out at the end. And we all know that that's totally true, especially for those of us who have shipped a game. It's a miracle that games get made at all because frankly, they're really hard to make. There's so many moving parts. Things break and crash all the time. It's a miracle anything gets released, let alone the amazing games that we have nowadays. So when you have audio people or person on your team very early, they will be allowed to fail and grow with the rest of your team. For those of you who have shipped a game, you know that the game at the end is not the game you planned at the very beginning. Sure, it may look the same or it may have the same general ideals, but really in the end, it's pretty different. It grew, it got better as time went on, and you learned some new ways to do different things. Creating audio and having audio early on in the design process, the development process, will make sure that your audio designers can fail with the rest of the team and fail upwards until a good thing happens. A great example of this is the hit video game Journey. A lot of you know it. The music for that game was made by Austin Wintory, and he worked on that on and off for about 3 years. That doesn't necessarily mean that the labor is so intensive that it takes 3 years to make that soundtrack, but he was allowed to experiment and grow with the rest of the team and gel with it and create something pretty phenomenal in the end. So you want to allow everybody on your team to fail upwards with you so that you can have the best game in the end. So when it comes to finding great audio people, there's a few tips I want to give you. So firstly, if you are near or in a relatively big city, mid-sized city, you know that there are game development meetups all the time. So you can go to one of your game development meetups at the IGDA or just type in game development on meetup.com, whatever it may be. That's totally fine. But you can also look for game audio meetups. There's lots of these. You'd be surprised how many of us there are in basically every big city, all coming together to hang out, talk about gear and audio and all that sort of good stuff. So you can show up to one of these game audio meetups and see if there's someone there that you can hire onto your team. That's a very easy way. You can meet them in person, see if they're cool, see if they're a weirdo, and avoid them. Whatever it may be, that will make things a lot easier for you. Of course, you can also ask your other development friends, maybe people who have shipped a game before, what they did for their sound, what they did for their music, who they would recommend in that space. And that way you have a recommendation, and then you can start talking to that person, those people, really quickly, really easily, without worrying if they'll run away from you or whatever it may be. Of course, you can also look on things like Twitter, which is basically a game development social network at this point. That's basically all who's left on there. So you can also look there and search under the game audio hashtag. That's a decent way to go about it. And if you live nowhere close to any sort of hub whatsoever, you're just making this thing on your own, but you know you want good sound, which is very smart of you, you can also get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with someone who would do a fantastic job for you. So next up is the topic of payment. Because more often than not, I see game designers, developers, whatever it may be, even experienced independent developers, not have a clue on how to pay their contractors, their audio people, or whatever it may be. There are a few different ways to go about this, and I'll share my favorite with you as well. So the first way is musically per minute of completed music. So per minute of completed and approved music. So if you write 4 minutes of music and you charge X amount per minute of music, then you charge X times 4 and you're done. So it's per minute of completed and approved music, not per minute of work or written music that hasn't been approved. You want this to be approved and finalized. So that's how much you pay per minute. That's common in AAA and Hollywood, but not so common in the indie space. It does happen though. Next is per asset. So if you're a sound designer, it can be X amount per sound effect. So it can be, here's this much per sound effect that you make. Very simple. Very straightforward. Usually an amount is agreed upon before any work is done, and then you kind of work on that stuff, and then you pay them either at the start, the end, the middle. You kind of break it out into various milestones. So every 3 months they get paid for the amount of sound that they made, for example. Lastly is my favorite method, and that's a flat fee. So charging, here's a project rate, that's it. So I charge X amount per project, and it can change depending on the size of the project, or if it's really small, it'll be a small flat fee. If it's a really big, long one, it can be a very big flat fee. So it changes. It changes depending on the scope, the size, the team, whatever it may be. But having a flat fee means that the client, you, the game developer, doesn't have to deal with figuring all the numbers out. If you're calculating 200 sound effects, what if it becomes 205 and I'm charging this much per sound effect, and oh God, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that kind of blank check dread that you get with the other payment methods I outlined. Also, it makes sure that the sound designer, composer, whoever it may be, knows how much to expect. So it's really clear on both sides. So that's the method I prefer. And lastly, there's also profit sharing. This is very useful if you either A, can't pay at all, so you have no money up front, but you plan on selling the game later, so you can share a certain percentage of the game's profits. Or if you can't pay the full flat fee of the composer or sound designer, you can pay something, some percentage of that flat fee. So if they charge $10,000, maybe you can meet them at $5,000, but also you can give them a few percent of the profits at the end, so you can combine the two. That's also a very common way, especially in the indie game development world. So you can give those a shot, play around with what works best for you and your company. Now, for those of you who are students or working on the side and passion project, etc., you're thinking, I'm not even planning on selling this, but I don't want to have to pay anyone because I'm not going to make any money off of this. That's okay. You can find people at your level at these meetups or online, or you can email me, whatever it may be. You can find people who are at your level, who are willing to work with you. So there might be game audio students that you can work with who just want the experience. Or you can find total beginners in the industry who are maybe willing to accept less pay because your company is brand new, you aren't working on anything big, and you're not planning to sell the game for very much, and you don't think it will sell very well anyway. That's okay too. But if you're a huge indie developer or a AAA developer, whatever it may be, you can find people at that level as well who will probably charge a lot more, which is fine because you'll get a great product in the end and you're able to pay it. So there's people on all ends of the spectrum. You just need to find the right one for you. So that will help you quite a bit. I hope that was very clarifying for you, especially to my game developer friends who may not have worked with audio people before. Hopefully that takes the fear out of contacting audio people and knowing how to work with them just a little bit more. Let me know in the comments if this video was helpful to you, because I always want to make stuff that helps everybody in the game industry. So let me know. And if you liked it, please subscribe to my newsletter. That's where I share all of my best stuff on making a living in the game industry and getting paid well, and all the business stuff as well as composition and sound design. All that sort of good stuff is shared in my newsletter. And recently I gave a talk at GDC Europe about the sound design of Hyperlight Drifter. So if you want to take a look at how I made the crazy sound design of Hyperlight Drifter, you can watch that talk using the annotation, or you can of course just click the link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.